The new year raises big questions for major economies around the world. What is the outlook for growth in 2025? China and Germany stumbled last year with fundamental challenges proving difficult to fix. Meanwhile, the US saw strong growth, but Donald Trump's return and his tariff-centred policies could have widespread effects. For a deeper look at what lies ahead for correspondents from New York, Berlin and Beijing, here's our beginning in the US.
Wall Street may not believe in Santa Claus anymore, but they're certainly grateful for one older gentleman. Donald Trump may not yet be in office, but he's promising large gifts to the market and the economy. He says he'll support the crypto industry, appointing crypto-friendly regulators. He says he can cut prices for consumers, although it's not clear how. And he also claims he'll cut regulations. This promise of even better times ahead has helped drive US markets even higher at the end of 2024. But some of his other plans pose serious risks. If Donald Trump comes into office in January and imposes huge tariffs on imports to the US, then economies everywhere will face a big disruption, and Wall Street might find a lump of coal in its stocking.
Traditionally, the German economy is seen as the powerhouse of Europe. It is, after all, the largest economy in Europe, but increasingly it's the economic laggard. We haven't seen any economic growth here to speak of for years, and 2025 looks set to be another year of stagnation. Now, that's mainly because of competition from China, but also a lack of global demand, both globally, but also in Europe and at home. And what's adding to the problem is political uncertainty. The governing coalition here collapsed in November after months of political strife and arguments, and there are snap elections in February. Now, the big question is, what is the government going to do to get the economy going again? We're not talking about a full-blown recession, but jobless figures are starting to rise slowly, and there are lots of questions about whether Germany's export-driven industrial model is still working for the whole country.
Economically, going into 2025, China's problems remain: local government debt, a real estate crisis which has seen families lose their entire life savings because of undelivered property, and persistent youth unemployment. Now, with the latter of those, you might think, what about the emerging tech sector? Isn't that a bright spot? Can't people go there looking for work? Well, yes, the tech sector does appear to have a bright future, but it's just not as labour intensive. We're talking cutting-edge robotics, not crowded production lines. So the government needs new sectors to emerge, and to drive this, it needs an increase in domestic demand. But the more pessimistic Chinese people are about their economy, the more likely these already conservative consumers are to save more rather than spend more. And turning this sentiment around is going to be very tough indeed.
Well, let's dig deeper on China. Kelvin Lam is senior China economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics and told me about some of the key issues the Chinese leadership is weighing up this year.
Generally speaking, I think domestic demand is generally quite weak in China. The leadership recognized the need to boost domestic demand, particularly consumption, to stop deflation expectation from building an economy. So we expect to see more monetary stimulus to boost growth. I think the last time they did it, in terms of moderately loose monetary policy, was a while ago. They reduced interest rate by 2% within 3 months. But we don't expect the same magnitude of rate easing this time because circumstances are different now. But we think the impact of rate easing on the economy will only be marginal because most of the credit-intensive sectors are still in the doldrums, and China needs to find a new way to grow the economy, which brings me to the second point. The Chinese leadership is also prioritized, to boost domestic demand, particularly consumption. But there's not much new proposals set in the December meeting. But we expect, Chinese economy, I think the Chinese authorities to boost consumption through tourism spending internally. maybe some consumption vouchers, which they have been doing before the Chinese New Year. But we don't expect a Western-style consumption voucher on a grand scale for China to boost growth.